And we are live. How's it going, everyone? We're back with our Friday market recap, and we have some really exciting news on the horizon. For those who are unaware, the Bitcoin ETF looks like it's going to go through unopposed by the SEC, and we're already seeing lots of signs that ETF is ready to go as we see Bloomberg terminals gearing up for it, the NASDAQ getting ready to list Valkyrie's ETF. So tons of exciting news, and the market is definitely reacting like it's going to happen.
Yeah, buddy. Dude, last night was real exciting. Like when it was like 10 p.m. my time, it felt like when that announcement came out that, sources said that SEC won't oppose it. And at first I was like, meh, right? And then I saw it from someone else and someone else. And then, who's Grayscale's guy?
No idea.
Silbert.
Okay, yeah.
Barry Silbert. He tweeted, I'm like, okay, this seems legitimate. And obviously, I think this is kind of what a lot of U.S. investors have been waiting on, which is like just a nod of approval that Bitcoin's not going anywhere. To me, it's like a confidence boost in the market as a whole.
Definitely.
Right?
I think it's something that kind of solidifies it. It's now publicly traded. It's easily accessible by traditional finance. So it's something that, yeah, like you were saying, it really solidifies the entire space, not only Bitcoin. Bitcoin's obviously going to be the direct recipient of this catalyst, but this is going to trickle down into all of the crypto markets and eventually get to DeFi once this news kind of dies down and people start rotating their capital.
Yeah, and I know to get a little deeper into it, it's a Bitcoin futures ETF, which is what the SEC had already said they're not going to consider I guess you call it like a physical custody ETF. And I think we were going to get into that a little bit. I've been putting some thoughts, not really into why they want to do futures, but to why they don't want to do a physical ETF. And I read some of their comments. I forget who specifically from the SEC, but there's concerns that if the ETF is backed, so if it's a physically backed ETF, that means if you buy shares, they've got to go buy Bitcoin, meaning they have to custody it. And so they've got to buy and sell based on the demand of the ETF. And one of the concerns was like, well, just outright, what if the custody situation gets hacked, right? So this ETF could go from $1 trillion to $0. So it's not like if you look at Bitcoin as a commodity, if you have a gold ETF and the gold ETF physically owns the gold, it's not like someone's popping into the gold warehouse or whatever, the safe, wherever they store the gold,
the vaults,
the vaults, and like very quickly, in the middle of the night, driving out with 100 truckloads or something. It's not the same thing. And so I kind of get that concern, right?
And yeah, that's what I was even asking you before. I was like, do you know the difference? Because I've seen a little bit talked about that. So they're pretty much just, it's going to be based off futures markets, right? So that's kind of how it'll work.
And I think we'll have to see what exactly is going on under the hood once it launches. Like I've read about basically like perpetual futures, so they're not even settled. It's more just, It's like a derivative of a derivative, where this is going to be like a derivative of the price of actually physically settled futures, right? Because in a traditional future, there's got to be someone who sold it, someone who bought it, and if it reaches the date, that underlying asset or the Bitcoin has to change hands. So it sounds like from what, and I could be wrong here. It'll be interesting to see what actually happens and how it works, but it's almost like a synthetic stock derivative on Mirror Finance, like where it just follows this price underneath it. And that got me thinking further, like, well, why doesn't the SEC, beyond security, why doesn't the SEC want, like, doesn't it seem to make more legitimate sense to say the ETF holds the actual Bitcoin? And then I just got to thinking, well, Bitcoin's $1 trillion market, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. And if there is a ton of pent-up demand ready to pile into an easily accessible ETF, if $1 trillion wants to try to move in there in 3 months, what's the price of this ETF has to go to exchanges that already have supply problems and try to purchase this $1 trillion inflow from this, the largest market in the world, right? That's where this ETF is.
Yeah.
And to me, it kind of thinking about that means Bitcoin may not be ready for that. Like, so what? So Bitcoin's going to go from 50,000 to $1 million by the end of the year, right? Because this pent up demand that's buying, Americans love ETFs, right? You buy an ETF without having to worry about the underlying asset, right? You just buy it because it's like, that's the good way to invest. So I almost kind of feel like this futures product is a way, I read someone talking about it where the futures product creates like unlimited exposure to Bitcoin without having a real price impact, right? Like you can have these unlimited amount of contracts. So it almost like opens up a side door to let some of this demand into the market exposure without 10xing the price of Bitcoin in the process, making this insanely volatile underlying asset.
I mean, I think your million price prediction is a little far out, and I don't know if it necessarily works, because what's going to happen anyways, people are going to arbitrage this ETF, right? So instead of the actual custodian of the ETF going to buy this Bitcoin and storing it all one place, people are just going to arbitrage it, and they'll be governing that demand of Bitcoin. It's not like we're going to see the ETF trading at 10 to 20% premiums. It'll just get arbitraged out by a bunch of market participants versus kind of an exchange going, I think, and trying to custody all this Bitcoin. I think it'll just be spread out against all the market participants. So
agreed. And
I definitely see why it makes it easier though. And the worries behind it. I was a little bit confused at that at first, but it definitely makes sense. And brings some clarity on that front.
And I think it's like step one. I think when the Bitcoin market, because we'll just focus on Bitcoin because that's all this is.
Yeah. And I'll pop up the chart here in a second, but you can continue on.
I think when Bitcoin is a larger market, a physically settled product makes more sense, right? Like where I just got to imagine there's a ton of pent up demand that doesn't want to deal with opening a Coinbase account, right? And, that has their money with brokerages, financial advisors, wealth managers, whatever. And this is a way to release it and, again, give this nod of approval. So while it won't give us necessarily the demand through the product itself on Bitcoin itself, I think it's going to create plenty of demand for people that say, I was waiting to invest in Grayscale, for example, a physically settled product or physically backed product, but I wanted to know that the US wasn't going to crush my investment through regulation. And this might be the nod they needed to say, okay, I don't want to own this futures product because I don't even understand how it works, right? I just want to own Bitcoin. And I was waiting until, some governing sign. And I think this is the governing sign of legitimacy to Bitcoin in the United States of America. Like, to me, that's what this is. Like, when I went to bed last night, I was really thinking, we've been in this space for a long time. We have BSC News. We have our investments. This is the first time where
You've been in the space for a long time, but continue on.
Like 4 years. That's a long time, right? I've been invested
me for like a year. So
I've been in
crypto.
Just
correcting on my end.
Hey,
continue forward.
You've been in crypto for 10% of its existence. You've been in DeFi for 100% of its existence. So come on now. You're like an old guard over there. But I was laying in bed thinking, it was the first time where I didn't feel like this could all end tomorrow, right? There was always in the back of your mind, like, it seemed like markets of scale have made it. Network effect has made it, but the US government hasn't made it. And to me, the SEC is saying this is legitimate. And now we get to go be degens in the market, and maybe we have a career out of this, where before it's like, maybe this is a 5-year market. We don't know, right? We don't know where this is going.
Definitely. And I think that's what is most important, kind of that nod of approval. The regulation, I think, will definitely come down on DeFi, but overall for the sector, I think it's now very legitimized. Like it's going to be hard to argue. And then I
Yeah.
think on the end of kind of not having direct demand exposure, I think it'll be arbitraged anyway. There's large players in the crypto space who will take advantage of the premium and the discount across the ETF and actual exchanges. And so they'll be able to deal with that.
By the way, real quick, Greg, you are already being called out for your pancake swap art.
Yeah, it is a pancake swap NFT.
Do you own that NFT, or did you steal the image from
No,
the internet?
I right clicked and saved my own NFT.
Good for you.
Yeah,
it was legitimate use of NFT.
Yeah, and let me go ahead here. We're 10 minutes into the stream. We can pop a chart up here.
Yeah. Sorry for my rant. It's exciting right now.
And yeah, we have Bitcoin over 61,000. I have some doodles on here. These are just some pretty important levels. I'm just going to go ahead and take out some of these. I don't think we'll be revisiting 30K anytime soon.
Yeah, just take out the wick and we're at all-time high.
Yeah, and this looks really good. On the monthly, I think this wick isn't, none of this is large resistance. We have a massive news catalyst. You have a lot of people that we're putting on shorts. I think we're getting something of an effect of a gamma squeeze where you have lots of people short and they're going to be forced to close at some point here, especially with this news catalyst. So I wouldn't take any of these levels for granted at all. Even to the downside, if something happens and the ETF doesn't end up going through and it faces some opposition from the SEC, it'll definitely nuke below these 60, 58K levels. But these are just some cool levels to look at, kind of see how the price will react into them. We're coming up into another kind of pivot here, which is a little bit of resistance, but overall the market is eating up this news. Something we've been touching on for the past over a month now is Bitcoin dominance. And we're seeing that. We were talking about in here how it looked like it was bottoming. I maybe talked about it potentially breaking down into this orange box. We never got that. And now we are coming up and testing kind of these levels of Bitcoin dominance. And for anyone who might be a little bit confused about this is just how well Bitcoin is performing versus the broader market. So what this is telling us is, in general, Bitcoin has been outperforming most altcoins since mid-September about. So this is kind of what we've been talking about. I even said last stream that I wasn't going to position for this. I did pick up a little bit more of Bitcoin exposure, but I'm still kind of sticking with the narrative that this is amazing for the entire space. Altcoins will probably go on end of December into January and outperform Bitcoin. But right now, Pumpkin Coin is having its showdown in October. Yeah.
For Halloween, there you go.
Yep.
Do you really think end of December for an altcoin rally? Let's move that up to November 1st.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, we can kind of start jumping around here, and something I'm paying the most attention to is Solana, and this is already catching a bid on all this news as well. I'd be curious. We can get into some cool charts here. We can do a Sol BTC chart, and this is the wrong chart. Sol USD, BTC USD, just to kind of see how one of these. Here we go. So you can still see these DeFi networks. Bitcoin is outperforming. That's why you're seeing this chart correcting here. And that's kind of the same thing that Bitcoin dominance is telling us, just from a different angle. So that's great. Let me just see what this comment is. Oh, you want me to check out the D's nuts, thousands of BNB that are funding out of the top wallets. I don't know if that's too legitimate of a comment, but we'll go ahead and we can check out BNB token here, because that's definitely something exciting and something I wanted to touch on as well, because we had that massive fund come out of Binance, which is incredible news for Binance Smart Chain ecosystem.
Hey, Greg, can you put an indicator on D's nuts, and so when it's mooning, we know it's time to just sell everything? That'll be a market top indicator.
I'll jump right on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
And so this is pretty exciting here for BNB. We had the accelerator fund announcement here. I think, was it 2 days ago now? Down here, somewhere in this little leg. And now BNB is running much higher. And this goes far beyond this initial catalyst we've had. This is the largest ecosystem fund to date. And we've already seen what's happened with things like Avalanche and Phantom, who also have smaller ecosystem funds. Um, it's just been massive gains. So seeing Binance Smart Chain recognize that they need to incentivize users, developers, and just the entire ecosystem as a whole is kind of showing that Binance Smart Chain is here to stay, and they're looking to be a leading DeFi network.
Yeah, that was the other big piece of news that really just got overshadowed last night was the $1 billion injection into BSC.
Definitely. And I wanted to actually pull up that release here and just kind of go over a little bit, because they broke down the fund, and I know we'll get some more information as it sort of develops, but they broke down the fund. We even got an announcement of the new monthly stars in the MVB. So these are projects that are receiving a portion of this $1 billion fund. And just to outline, so the first accelerator fund was about $100 million, and this one is 10 times larger. So Binance Smart Chain is really looking to ramp up ecosystem support. There's just kind of some general things in here, but this is what I wanted to touch on, the breakdown here. So you have 100 million going towards liquidity incentives, which is great. This is incentivizing users, boosting yields, really providing liquidity for these trading pairs. So this is incredibly important. And then on top of that, we just have other things as well. We have the builder program, talent development, and incubation program. So talent development, this is really cool. This is more for the longevity of the space and bringing in well-educated builders. So this is going towards universities, boot camps, R&D, and kind of just focusing on education, building something from the ground up. So I think that's incredible there that that's being done. We touched on the liquidity incentive program. Something that I think is pretty notable here is BSC will be focusing on derivatives products. This is pretty important, especially considering the recent crackdown on derivatives. They even name dropped McDex here, which is a protocol that's been performing extremely well a little bit before this announcement, and now it's up, fairly decent. I was looking at it the other day, and it's performing fairly solid.
So had BSC provided any liquidity incentive up to this point?
I think they have a little bit. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe seeing it in, I think in some of the larger exchanges, they did provide some sort of liquidity. I know an example I can think of is the BNB and BETH pool on Bakery Swap. I think part of that was incentivized by Binance Smart Chain. But I could be wrong, and I've seen other little places where BNB has been used to boost rewards, but I think we'll definitely see some more of that. I'm curious to know if this is going to be, so here is providing liquidity rewards. So that's what's more important. They're not just providing liquidity and taking rewards from users. They're actually using this fund to incentivize users to provide liquidity. So I think that's really important. And pretty much that just means that we should see some higher yields on projects like McDex, some of these other monthly stars here. We have O3 Swap, Open Ocean, Strips Finance, Woo Network, and Kine. So these will all probably be eligible for some sort of liquidity incentives depending on how they progress and how the Binance Smart Chain community evaluates them. So I think that's incredibly important. We're also seeing more focus on games and NFTs in this fund. So I think that's even outlined here somewhere in the builder and incubation program. So this 300 million will be added to the most valuable builder, which are these projects in here that have just been selected as monthly stars. So this is incredibly important. Not only are users being incentivized, but developers are being incentivized to come and build. And that's what's really important. You need innovative and new products and dApps to really attract users and stay relevant. So it's nice to see that. And then last but not least, Binance will also be investing into some of these projects and just providing them tons of resources and helping them out, in the sense of, I think it says in here, fund will be utilized to grow decentralized computing, gaming, metaverse, virtual reality, AI, financial services, not only on BSC. I imagine we're going to see a slight bias towards BSC, and it's going to help bring collaboration with industry leading organizations. So overall, there's a ton of different branches here that this fund is going towards, and they all serve some sort of important ecosystem focus. And I really like that this seems like a well-rounded fund that they have. Ooh,
It does.
my camera.
Like, if you look at other chains, a lot of them have the liquidity incentive. And then some of these other elements, but really this is probably the most comprehensive, growth fund for a DeFi chain at this point.
Definitely.
And definitely the largest, like without a doubt.
Yeah. And I mean, we're seeing this again. The best indicator to kind of look at these things is how the market's reacting. And this release came out on October 12th, just to confirm. So since the release, BNB is up. We'll drop this down to the 8-hour for some more precision. But since the announcement, BNB is up 16%, and none of these funds have even been deployed yet. Just give me a second. I'm going to straighten up my camera here. But yeah, I think that's incredible. And we're really starting to see all of these DeFi networks kind of battle for liquidity and development. And I think that's a nice segue into what I love looking at, just taking a look at DeFi Llama and how DeFi as a whole is shaping up. Overall, DeFi has over 200 billion in TVL, which I think is amazing. We're only seeing this sector continue to grow. We can kind of pop onto some of the more prominent chains and the chains we're focusing here at DeFi Direct. So Solana, of course, is kind of consolidating around this 11 billion mark, looking to punch through. Phantom has seen a massive influx. I think this was attributed to the launch of the Iron Bank. Andre Crone, the developer and CEO of Yearn Finance, is pushing hard in deploying projects on Phantom. So we saw a massive TVL influx here. Avalanche, tons of VC support. And with the ecosystem rush incentives, we're seeing it just chugging along in price discovery at 6 billion TVL, which is great. And then Binance, we're still consolidating here. We're seeing kind of a slight rise, but I think once we see these ecosystem funds deployed, this will be right on back to the races. And it's also most important to note that Binance Smart Chain is the second largest DeFi network currently, with Ethereum, of course, kind of housing most of the capital in DeFi with 151 billion. And ETH is also seeing amazing growth right now. So overall, the entire kind of altcoin and DeFi sector is looking healthy. We're seeing capital flow in, but the spotlight is definitely on Bitcoin at the moment.
Yeah, and we know it'll rotate, so you just got to sit patiently. That's
definitely
the name of the game here.
Yep. And then just looking at the ETH chart, we're coming back up to all-time highs here. So overall, as we've kind of been saying, this ETF news is incredibly bullish for the market. It's still not 100% confirmed, but it's really looking like the ETF is going to go through here without any opposition. And I'm curious to see what the catalyst is from that. I personally think the market is starting to price in the news, but we're not going to get the true catalyst till we see one of these ETFs listed.
Yeah, I actually saw an article that was saying that this was already priced in, and that would assume that the Bitcoin market is an efficient market, which it just isn't.
It's not, yeah.
So, and especially if the thought is this was news that makes some sidelined investors comfortable or willing to take larger positions or something, there's no way it's priced in. So, I mean, I would imagine there's some people, front running, but I don't think this was a priced in move at all. I think now the only question is, do we just slice through all-time highs, right? Or do we have a little rejection?
Yeah, and I think it should be interesting. I mean, we're getting crazy bid right now on the hourly. So that's super nice to watch. And just a little rotation here back to DeFi. I did want to touch on kind of this new buzzword that's being out, DeFi 2.0, on this stream. And there was an amazing tweet by Delphi Digital. Um, and they took down the tweet. I'm not exactly sure why they did. I think it was quite literally because they realized they leaked too much alpha. It was a chart of like the top 5 to 10 DeFi 2.0 tokens they were looking at. I can remember some of them off the top of my head, but I think only a couple, to be honest. So the first one being Spell and Ohm. And these are very interesting tokens here that kind of my fundamental understanding. I haven't gotten too far into them, but in order to, well, for Spell, these might be different. So let me take a step back. Spell, I know for sure. Spell creates a stable coin. It's called Magic Internet Money, and it is pretty much a more efficient crypto collateral lending protocol. So it takes what DAI is doing and just makes it 10 times more efficient. You can look at, it has much more protocol value. I mean, protocol revenue with a lower TVL. So this token has seen 900% gains in the past 30 days and over 40x on launch. Another token that's been performing extremely well is Olympus Dow. And the main point of this protocol is it takes a different take on providing liquidity. So instead of having insane incentive rewards in an inflationary token, they incorporate bonding. And I'm honestly not 100% sure how those mechanics work. That's something I have on my to-do list to get into. But this is another DeFi 2.0 token that has a ton of buzzwords. I know Time on Avalanche is a fork of Ohm. So these are the same models here. It's just on Avalanche. Another DeFi 2.0 token that I've been looking at is Popsicle Finance, or ICE. That hasn't been performing the greatest. But overall, in the past kind of 30 days and 4 months, it's been outperforming the entire market. And this is cross-chain yield optimization and yield or LP management for Uniswap v3. So currently only that second part is out, and it's really cool actually. It ensures that your liquidity is being kept on the curve of Uniswap v3 and you're always earning fees. The next product they plan to launch is a multi-chain optimizer that actually automatically will switch between the largest dexes and get you the most optimal APY. And then one of the last ones that I'll just throw out there that I can remember off the top of my head is Synapse. And we've been covering this for months now. This is a fork of Nerve Finance, and they actually just performed the airdrop to Nerve Finance holders. So if you weren't able to swap your Nerve tokens to Synapse, you can now go claim them on the Synapse website. And that was a very nice airdrop. Synapse is like 5x the price of Nerve, and then you got 2.5 Synapse tokens for every Nerve. So definitely go claim that if you were in Nerve Finance and were able to originally do the bridge for those tokens. But I wish I could have kept that chart. Delphi Digital ended up deleting it, but this is kind of a new narrative going forward. And I think these DeFi 2.0 projects, or projects that are just building things that are multi-chain, novel products, are really going to heat up in this next altcoin leg higher. And I think a key here is a lot of these tokens start off at really small market caps and they have pretty innovative products. So tons of capital flows in at once, and you're kind of seeing these insane gains we saw in January on Binance Smart Chain and in DeFi Summer back in August of last year.
Yeah, I'd imagine that the next major push is this interoperability through DeFi protocols. So you're taking advantage of any blockchain from any blockchain, which is really going to be good to see. You know, it's going to like kind of like arbitrage every chain against each other automatically. And so
Definitely.
I know.
I 100% agree on that. Like we have all this TVL within these chains. There's got to be a way it can frictionlessly move and kind of swap between all of these DApps.
Yeah, I imagine really every DeFi service that we see, like DEXs and especially the like a 1inch, for example, if they can route cross chain to get you a better deal, somehow that's possible, right? I don't know if that would ever find a better deal, but like yield optimizers, you could have Bitcoin USDC on basically every single chain. There's no reason it's not moving your liquidity for you to get the best yield.
Exactly. So I think that's what it's getting towards. Other than that, my main focus is trying to spot out these DeFi 2.0 tokens, and just trying to be on top of that. I'm in this really awkward position where I'm trying to keep up with all of these chains, specifically BSC, Solana, Phantom, and Avalanche. I think the real kind of positive expected value or the best bet to take is to really dive into one of these chains and understand what's going on, because there's just so much information. And all of these chains are showing strength. It's going to be really hard to pick the particular winner. And I think spreading yourself out thin is not the recipe to outperform. So kind of just figuring out what chain you mainly want to focus on. And that doesn't mean you don't dabble into other things, but just be careful. I've had a recent urge to kind of jump into a bunch of different things, but I think that's chasing kind of the momentum isn't going to do anything for you. It's just going to end up chopping you up, and you'll probably rotate out of something that ends up performing well anyway.
Yeah, and I think that this cross-chain, multi-chain DeFi push is actually going to kill the concept of one chain outperforming another, because they're just going to be supporting each other, and it's going to be wherever a developer likes to be and wherever a user likes to be, and the rest of it, it's kind of meaningless in a sense, right?
Exactly. So I think it's only going to get more exciting for all of these ecosystems. They're all going to have their own building going on. I'm sure we're going to see an immense amount of capital rotation between these ecosystems. So that'll be interesting to kind of watch and keep up with. And really the spotlight right now is this Bitcoin ETF. And as of now, the market is pricing in that this thing's going to get approved. And it seems like most people in the space are pretty confident on that. So it'll be interesting. The first decision is for the ProShares ETF, and that'll be on October 18th. So if there's no opposition by then, I believe what will happen is the ETF will then be good to go. I believe
so that's Monday.
Yeah. And then the Valkyrie decision is on the 25th. I think there's another one on the 19th, which is Invesco. So it should be super interesting. I don't know if all of these will get approved. So it's going to be definitely a volatile next couple of weeks in the market, which is great. That's what we need. And overall, I think the news that is going to come out of this month of October is going to end up being bullish.
Agreed.
All right. Well,
to the moon,
we're gonna wrap that up here. We'll be back next week. I'm curious to see kind of where all this DeFi TVL is standing, where Bitcoin's going to be at. I think we'll be in price discovery by next week, and of course, always keeping an eye on Bitcoin dominance, because it's kind of just fun to track those things, see what is truly leading the market. Thanks everyone for joining, and we will catch you live next